me some braided brake lines to check, and I'm really excited because I've got Venhill brake lines fitted at the moment, and a great question I often get asked is the difference between these two great manufacturers, both based in Britain, both doing some fantastic work, but these Venhill brake lines I'm really excited to try out, and what I really like, because they come in 11 different colours, is the fact that I picked blue because it's going to match this bike. So very easy mod to do. Let's go and take a quick look. So the reason we swap over our brake lines from the standard rubber ones that come with the bikes is that the idea behind the brake line is it's fluid that literally squeezes down through the pipe and squeezes our pistons shut in its most simplest form. Now with rubber that can deteriorate over time, which means it can expand outwards. Now if we've got fluid running through it, we don't want it to expand out, we want it to push down, to push those pistons closed so that it breaks when we need it to most. Now looking at the Venhill website, they talk about the fact that braking pressure, the pressure that runs through these hoses, is about 25 to 30 psi. Now before one of these leaves the Venhill workshop, they will test it to 1500 psi. That's every single line that leaves their workshop. So I found that really quite reassuring. Every now and again they'll take out an additional one and they'll test it to an even higher standard again. So taking a closer look at the fittings, and these come in either stainless steel, chrome or black, and I've gone for the stainless steel on this one. Here's where one of the major differences lie. Look at this, this is a swivel socket nut. So what that means is it will actually install by simply screwing on here. This means that when I come to install the line, I can do it completely twist free. So no twists in the line, so there's nowhere for the hydraulic fluid to get stuck. And actually very easy installation. So I'd say this is probably one of the major differences between the two brands. So there's the brake line that we're going to replace. If we follow this up and round, here we go, we can see exactly where we're going to reconnect it. And then if we follow this black pipe up, it's going to come up and underneath our seat. And there you can see the upper reservoir up here. So you can see here it's a couple of Phillips screws to get that undone. Now you could take your seat off, you could take the rear cowling off, however there is actually a little bit of play in this reservoir, so you can actually angle it slightly so you can get to the screws there. Mine haven't been open for a while, so really a bit tough going on that one. And on that one as well. Before I go any further, I'm going to put a load of rags around this and I'll get rid of some of the bits inside here just so that I can make sure that if there is any spillage I can catch that without it going anywhere near any paintwork. Okay, so we've got some rags, we've got some gloves, I think we're ready to go. What we need to do is we need to take out the brake fluid from the upper reservoir, because of course when we take the brake lines off, it's all full of fluid. We certainly don't want that spilling down the bike. Goodness me, look at the state of those. Do something to clean those up before we put those back on, that's for sure. So carefully now, as I take that one off, you can see the rubber diaphragm, which is acting as a seal, and it's also, when the brake fluid is pushed down through the brake lines, it's expanding to make sure that no air is able to get into the system as well. So put that to one side nice and safe. And there's the close-up of the emptied reservoir. Now, like I say, there is still brake fluid in the system, so we'll get that out now before we start to remove the lines. I mentioned it on the last video, but with the Venhill Vampire Brake Bleed kit, it comes with the right adapter that just simply fits over the top. That makes life nice and easy, let me tell you. And then all we're going to do is pump it up to give us a bit of a vacuum. Nice and easy. Now, if at any point this vacuum doesn't hold, it means that you may not have there might be a gap or something with the hoses here. So if it doesn't hold its pressure, it's not a vacuum circuit, so you might just need to check some of that. You're going to open the bleed nipple and we can see the brake fluid is going to come flowing out. We'll keep an eye on the pressure, and if the pressure drops, we'll just keep pumping it to make sure all the brake fluid comes out. And looking at the colour of the brake fluid, I didn't think it looked too bad in the top, but actually it's quite dark in colour. Dark usually means that it's absorbed a fair amount of water, and this can affect its effectiveness as well. So probably about right to get that swapped over anyway. Before I start removing anything, I'm going to put a plastic bag over the paintwork on my wheel, the cloth on top. That way, if there is any spillage, I know that the paintwork on my wheels is protected. Okay, 14mm socket. Just loosen that off. Okay. There's no leakage or seepage at the moment, so that's good. That's what I'm going to put the end straight into once it comes off. Okay, so a little bit of brake fluid came out, not a huge amount, so I'm pleased about that. And we do have some spillage off the caliper. So now any brake fluid that's coming off whilst this piece is dangling down is all going to collect inside this bag and then not around any of my painted parts. Here's the upper part of the rear brake line, and again it's the 14mm, it's the same head to get it off, which is just along here. However, you'll notice there's not a lot of space actually here to work around, and I found it really quite difficult to try to get a tool in. There wasn't enough room to manoeuvre. So what I'm going to do is put a couple of extensions on and come at it from the other side. So very minimal fluid coming out of the top, but still. Okay, so that's that off. Then all we're going to do is just carefully lift that through. Is it going to come through that? That's it, and voila! One rear brake line removed. And before I go to fit anything, what I want to do is take the old hose and compare it with the length of the new hose to make sure that it's the same length. Yeah, brilliant. Now, Venhill hoses also come with the cable protectors as well, so I like that feature. Nice and simple then, all we've got to do is exactly the same process in reverse and we'll get this fitted. So here we've got the fixtures and fittings that come in the kit. So we've got the banjo bolt, then the crush washer, so that just sits on like that. Then we've got the swivel, and then another crush washer. And all we're going to do, the installation, all we need is a 6mm Allen key and an 11mm spanner. So we're just going to pop that on there just so it's hand tight. Now this is one of the features that puts Venhill slightly differently. So you'll notice that here, with this actually installed, and here's the swivel part here as well, what it means is I can actually, I can thread the line and put it in the right location without any kind of form of twisting, and then I can do it up properly on here. So like I said, this is just hand tight, and then we'll run the rest of the cabling through. That's amazing. That's just so easy to do. Again, we'll make that just finger tight. I've got the cable clip from earlier, so I'll put that back on. It's all just finger tight at the moment. It's not properly tightened up. But I'm just checking that the routing of the cable is good. There's no twisting, there's no kinks. Fantastically easy with that swivel bolt. Excellent. It's 23 Newton meters for the torque setting for the banjo bolt. I'll put a link in. There's quite a funny video where I do try and use a torque wrench on the caliper bolts in the past. Check out the video, it'll give you a bit of a giggle. This swivel nut here needs an 11mm spanner. I haven't got one of those, so I'm going to use an adjustable. and not too tight, just to make sure. And that's it, that's done. I'll do the same thing up at the top. That's it, that's as quick as it gets. So we're going to put some brake fluid in the top reservoir again, and then we're going to use the Vampire brake bleed kit to draw the brake fluid through the brake lines and the caliper, and get those bright brakes primed. Haha, easy for you to say. So we're going to fill the top reservoir with brake fluid. Just a quick tip, use that 8mm spanner and make sure that the bleed nipple at the bottom end is closed, because that'd be a bit of a disaster. When you are using your brake fluid, make sure you don't shake the bottle. You don't want to introduce a whole load of air bubbles in here. Air is absolutely not what we're aiming for. God, it's making some gurgling sound as it's running all the way down through the system. I don't know if the video can pick that up. Okay, so if you've not seen the other videos before, the idea behind bleeding the brake system is to draw the brake fluid from the reservoir down through the system, taking out all the air bubbles that go with it. So we will need to make sure that as we bleed down through the system, the level of brake fluid in here is going to drop. So we need to make sure it doesn't get too low down past the hole at the bottom, otherwise that's going to introduce a whole load more air into the system. We're going to have to start the process all over again. So if I push the brake pedal, the rear brake pedal now, there's just no resistance there whatsoever. So we need to get all of that air out of the system, so that becomes a nice solid brake again. So we're getting the drill now, 8mm spanner on the bleed nipple. Very funky cool end of the Venhill Vampire brake bleed kit on the top. Pump it up, get a bit of a vacuum, crack open. Oh, there we go. Crack open the bleed nipple. Keep drawing the... Now then, here we go. So this is where having a vacuum pump comes in really handy, because instead of needing to pump the pedal repetitively, actually we could just pump this and it just pulls all the brake fluid down through the reservoir, down through all of our tubing. Loads of air bubbles coming out to start with. You see all of these tiny little air bubbles that are in the tube at the moment. Well, this is what we're trying to effectively bleed out of the system. These tiny little micro bubbles affect the braking, give it what's called a spongy feeling. We've continued along here now until there are no more bubbles that are coming down through this tube, so that's fantastic. When I now press the brake lever, that's really solid, so that's fantastic. And the reservoir at the top, that just needs topping off and then the cap putting back on. So the screw I took off the reservoir earlier, that's a before and after. Let me show you how quick and simple this little trick is. Take a standard drill, tighten the screw on, a little bit of sandpaper, whoa, it gets a little bit hot. But there you go. Not quite as good as a new screw, but as a short-term gap it looks a hell of a lot better than the other one did. Let's put that back together then.